Welcome back to another episode of the Young Guides Podcast. I'm Keaton, and this is...
I'm Kyle.
But first, a word from our partners.
First up, we want to talk about Heather's Choice. If you go to the Heather's Choice website and use our code TheYoungGuides15 at checkout, you can get yourself 15% off site-wide. So go check them out. We got packaroons for snacks. We got dinners. We got breakfasts. We got a bunch of new recipes coming out to you guys. So head on over to heatherschoice.com at checkout. Use our code TheYoungGuides15 and get you guys something for your next outdoor adventure.
Awesome. For our next partner, we have Lucky Bug Lures, home of the Bingo Bug, Zombie Max, Fusion Extreme, Lucky Plug, F-Bomb, and Pike Bomb. They take conventional lures and change them up a little bit, and it helps your fishing and your luck on the water. Go check them out. www.luckybuglures.com. Go get yours today.
All right. Up next, we have Northern Knits. Emily up here in Anchorage knits wool hats and distributes them through her social media platforms. You can find her on Facebook or on Instagram. Her Instagram account is northern._.knits. And you can see some of the hats that she has in stock and order from there, or you can kind of get an idea of what you want, message her, and you can set something up to have a specific pattern or color scheme that you want in your hat. Keaton and I both have one. Well, I actually have several. Keep you very warm. They're very fashionable. They look great. They feel great. You'll look awesome if you wear one. So check her out, Northern Knits.
Next up, we have a friend, Matt, at Alaska Rod Co. He just released a new lineup of rods for the 2022 season. They have a lineup of 8 freshwater spinning rods with actions and power for anglers chasing big, aggressive fish. With lengths ranging from 6 foot to 9 foot, there are plenty of options for various applications and style. In a world full of mass-produced rods, Alaska Rod Co. makes sure that rods and services provide what other brands cannot. Rods built and tested in Alaska.
Matt also is coming out with a new line of fly rods. Alaska Rod Co. fly rods are built for harsh environments while maintaining the utmost level of craftsmanship. Right now, Alaska Rod Co. is 9-foot fly rods ranging from 5 weights to 8 weights. 10-foot single-hand rods, switch, and spare rods will be available late winter or spring. There's enough rod companies out there trying to build the next lightest and flashy rod. Alaska Rod Co. is here to build you a rod you can pass down generations. Fishing means many things to many different people. Alaska Rod Co. is honored to build you the ultimate tool that connects you to that meaning.
If you want to learn a little bit more about Alaska Rod Company, go back and check our previous podcast. We asked him several questions about his rods, his warranties. He does a great job at explaining everything and covering everything about his company. Also, if you have questions, you can always DM him or DM us and we can get you going in the right direction. So, Alaska Rod Co.
Finally, we want to say thank you for listening to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. If you can, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review and a rating. It helps us know that we're doing this for the right reasons, and you guys are giving us some great feedback already. You can also head over to Spotify. They now have a rating feature on the podcast there. So if you could let us know how we're doing, that would be great. It also helps helps us spread the word through you. But makes us pop up on the feeds wherever you listen to podcasts a lot more if you give us a great rating and a great review. You can also head to our website and contact us through that form if there's anything that you think we should know about, if you want to be on our show, or if there's something that we need to work on. You can also find us on Instagram, and same thing, give us some feedback, drop us a message, and we will get back to you.
With Instagram, make sure to also check our story. We before we do our podcast on Thursdays, we always have an option for you guys to ask questions to the people coming on our podcast. And we post a lot of stuff that we like to get viewers and people following us involved. So if you want to head on over, give us a follow and start asking questions and join in on the fun on our Instagram page.
Without further ado, here's the episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. I'm Keaton, and this is...
I'm Kyle.
Go ahead, Kyle.
And today we have on Todd Fuchigami. Todd is the guide and owner of Ellensburg Angler. They're an Orvis endorsed outfitter on the Yakima River in Ellensburg, Washington. Todd is essentially Keaton's boss, right, Keaton?
Mm-hmm.
And I used to guide for Todd when I lived in Washington. I spent like 3.5 seasons there on the Yakima. And Todd's kind of what got Keaton and I started. He's kind of stuck his neck out and said, we're going to give these two yahoos a shot. And so we wanted to bring Todd on to talk about his background, what it's like to own an outfitting service, and then what it's like to manage guides. We've talked to a lot of people who are guides, young guides in the industry, guys who have a lot of experience under their belt. But we've never talked to somebody who manages a group of guides. So we thought we might want to talk to Todd a little bit about that. And with that, you have anything else to add, Keaton, before we jump in here?
No, let's get this started. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Todd?
Yeah, I'm originally from Hawaii. What got me into fly fishing is, so after I graduated high school, I joined the Army. And so I've always been into fishing, spear fishing, lures, bait, you name it, reefs of Hawaii. When I got to my first duty station after joining the Army, I was stationed in North Carolina at Fort Bragg, and I picked up bass fishing right off the bat. And I got really into that, just something fun to do in North Carolina. If anyone's from there, they know the bass fishing is awesome. And so I was doing that for a bit. And then during a leadership school I was attending, I met another medic, and he was a fly angler. I knew what fly fishing was, heard of it. I thought that's something that just old white guys did. But he was like, "Hey, I heard you're really into fishing. You want to try this fly fishing thing?" I'm like, I don't know. He kind of had to twist my arm a little. And so once we got done with that leadership school, we had some time off. He took me up to the Smoky Mountains on the North Carolina side, not too far out of Asheville, North Carolina. And he lent me all his gear. Of course I had nothing. And I think I ended up buying some Walmart waders because he didn't have some. And that's what he gave me a real quick crash course. Say, this is how to fly fish. It was pretty basic. We were fishing on a stocked stream or river. And it took me, and he walked one way, I walked the other. And it took me about an hour, I'd say, to catch my first fish. I don't even remember how I did it, because I can probably imagine I could not get a good drift to save my life. So I think I was still doing like a cast out and like strip it back in kind of thing, because that's what I knew. But thankfully these were stock trout. But even with that stock, it was a brown trout. I was hooked. It just took me one outing, and I knew, man, this is awesome. So after that trip, for the next bit, I was getting rid of my spinning rods, my bait casting rods, selling it or giving it away to other guys, and slowly building my fly fishing. And I think I ordered stuff from, what was it, Cabela's at the time. And I still have one of the reels. And it turned out that reel was a Ross CLA. So that was the only good piece of equipment that I bought. The other stuff was pretty chintzy, crappy stuff, but it worked. It was good enough, just to fish around that, any chance we got, we'd go camping up in the mountains there and go fly fishing. And that was my first introduction to the sport. And then I kind of went to Honduras for a year after that, after deployment. I didn't have much opportunity. Little did I know that you could saltwater fly fish at the time. And I was in frickin' Honduras, right next to Belize. And then after I spent a year in Honduras, I was stationed in Fort Drum, New York. And that's when I really dove in all or nothing into fly fishing. I was lucky. There were some streams right off the base. There was the Adirondack Park with the world famous, the West Branch of the Ausable near Lake Placid. There was the world famous Delaware, the Battenkill, all up and down that, eastern side. So, and also the Salmon River, which was 45 minutes away. So from late fall all the way through the spring. I would just, any chance I got, I would head down and do some steelhead fishing, as we called it. And it was great. And that's when I really, I spent hours upon hours standing in some frigid ass water, staring at a bobber. And that's when I mastered like nymphing for steelhead. And then once in a while I'd catch a brown trout. But that was the thing, those big lake run rainbows. And yeah, that's when that was all I did was fly fishing at that point. And then I did 2 deployments out of Fort Drum. So I went to Iraq once, and then 10 months after I got back, turned right back around and went to Afghanistan. And the funny thing is, when we got back from Iraq, most people are leaving. They're going to different leadership schools or continuing training in the Army. And so you lose a lot of that experience. And so we already knew, which is kind of a bummer. We were coming back from Iraq, and we knew in 10 months we were heading right back out the door and going to Afghanistan. And so one of the medics that I was with, he was stationed at the Yakima Training Center. And he mentioned, he's like, hey, I know you like fly fishing. You might want to go check out being stationed at the Yakima Training Center. I was like, Yakima? Never heard of it. Sounded like it was in Japan. And if you're not from Washington or stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord, you don't know where the Yakima Training Center is. And it's just a big training base. So I asked my superiors, and, kind of made a little drug deal. And I talked to my sergeant major, and I said, I'd like to be stationed at the Yakima Training Center. He's like, if you stick around and don't leave Fort Drum and you go to Afghanistan, when you come back, you're going to be able to go to, wherever you want. And this was just a handshake deal. This was nothing in writing. So I was like, okay, let's do it. So I stuck around. We redeployed, and we went to Afghanistan. About halfway through Afghanistan, I get an email from my sergeant major, says, when you get back, you have orders to the Yakima Training Center. I was like, yes, awesome. And so even in Afghanistan, and even prior to that deployment in Iraq, I always had a fly tying kit and a fly rod or 2, just to, stay sharp, cast, teach other dudes around it. And it was always something to look forward to. Like, hey, when we get back to the States, we're gonna take you fly fishing, kind of thing. And so it's even when I was gone away from the States, it was never far from my mind, fly fishing. I was kind of like obsessed with fly fishing at that time. And so, came back from Afghanistan. Within 3 months, I'd say, I was in a U-Haul driving across the country from New York all the way to Yakima, Washington. And boom, I was there. I hadn't even unloaded the U-Haul yet, and I was already fly fishing on the river there. And I remember getting a ticket because the first license that I bought was for the next season. But I was able to, the guy saw that I had a license, and I just had to show, he said he wouldn't actually give me the ticket if I went out and got the license for the rest of the season. It was weird because it was in February. So February, March. Yeah. I don't know why they sold me the next year's ones. But anyways, so yeah, that's what brought me to Yakima. I was stationed at the Yakima Training Center, worked as a flight medic. And one of the first people I encountered was Stephen Woodruff. And he was already a guide at one of the guide services here in the Valley. And younger dude, we just kind of chatted, and I would always hang out around the shop, which was in the canyon, and the training center was like 15 minutes away from the shop. So he introduced me to drift boat fishing, which I had no idea or had no experience with. I saw drift boats out on the Salmon River, but I was always a wade angler. So one of the first things, we became fishing buddies, and one of the first things he did was teach me how to row. So that was my experience. And rowing, big Western River, was on the Yakima here. And after that, we just fished. And a couple of years later, I was ready to get out of the Army. And he said, hey, why don't you ever think about guiding? And I was like, oh, I don't know. He made it sound so easy. It's like anybody could do it. I was like, okay. And he pretty much talked me into it. And I actually started guiding even before I exited the Army. I was just doing the walk and wade trips and the Rocky Ford Spring Creek trips. And the day I got out of the Army, not long after, we my wife and I drove from Yakima to Idaho Falls to pick up my drift boat, and drove all the way back because I had to guide the next day. And on my, I remember on my first trip ever out on my boat, we got blown off the water. Like the winds were just horrendous. So that was my first guide trip on my boat. It wasn't my first guide trip ever, just on my boat. I can remember that. We had to kind of cancel it halfway through, getting blown off the river there. But yeah, and I was guiding, what is that, 5 years? And the previous owner, Mike, kind of approached me and said, "Hey, you know, I've got a opportunity if you and your wife want to take over Ellensburg Angler." And you know, she had already been doing the bookings and doing that kind of part of the business, so we were pretty familiar. You know, I knew the guiding part. I have experience in that, and so we're like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we've owned Ellensburg Angler since 2019. And of course, the majority of that time has been under pandemic conditions. So if we can survive this, we can survive just about anything. So that's where we are now.
If you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about kind of why you joined the military and like where you kind of explained about where it took you, but what was your like driving force behind joining the military?
Okay. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. So I joined up in January of 2003. You know, I worked on an Army base as a civilian at a daycare center of all places. So I was surrounded by the Army community even before then. And I was actually working there when 9/11 happened. And so I actually was there when, you know, you knew some of these kids' parents they're going overseas. I was like, and that kind of put a little idea in my head. And also, you know, I grew up in Hawaii. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But you're kind of trapped there. And so I had not experienced anything outside of Hawaii very much besides trips to Disneyland, that kind of thing when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to see the world. So I joined the Army, and they definitely checked those boxes all over the world, all over the US. You know, I lived on the East Coast, West Coast, been to the opportunity. I think before joining the Army, I had visited, I think, 3 states: California, Nevada, and Arizona. I think today I have only like 4 states to check off, Alaska being one of them. So I definitely had the opportunity to travel and see the rest of the US and world. And I visited a lot of different countries as well. And so a combination of, you know, cliche patriotism and doing my part, as well as opportunity to see other things and experience other things. You know, if I didn't join the Army, I doubt I would have been introduced to fly fishing.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. And thank you for your service too. What made you want to start guiding? I know you said you fished with Stefan and he offered to teach you.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, he definitely, I don't think he ever guided. Yeah, he pretty much guided me in the beginning because I had no clue how to fish, you know, from a drift boat. But I'd say, unbeknownst to me, you know, whenever I had the chance, I was always introducing fly fishing to other non-fly anglers. And so that actually gave me a lot of practice, teaching people how to cast, you know, to drift, what to look for water-wise, that kind of thing. And this was all wade fishing back on the East Coast. And then when I got here, Stefan, you know, I'd always fish with him usually on his days off or right after one of his guide trips. And so that's when he would kind of talk to me about, you know, how his guide trips went. And so I kind of had a good idea of what I was going to be getting myself into when he offered for me to join him and Mike Kennedy in their guide service. And so he kind of gave me the basics on, hey, this is how you guide someone. This is how you teach, you know, this is what you want them to know. And, you know, I started with there, and from every season to now, I've improved upon that, and, you know, made it my own, essentially, on how I teach new anglers or even experienced anglers on what you can teach them and improve. Because I always admit, you know, I don't know everything, and I'm trying to learn constantly and improve as well. But there's always new things you can learn from different anglers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. What did you find most challenging to teach your clients how to fish? Like, did you find like dry fly fishing was tougher, nymphing, I mean, streamers? Like, can you kind of tell us how, and like what was the most challenging to teach a client to fish, or how?
I'd say it's still to this day, for the most part, for anglers, is the amount of work it takes to maintain a good drift. I mean, it's not fly selection. It's not, it's basically getting the basic drift down. I don't think people getting into the sport understand how hard you have to work, and to be able to read water. It takes some experience, but to just constantly be on the money. If you're a half second, 1 second late on that mend, your drift, some water, your drift is over. And that's what I want most of my anglers to take away, is that it's a very active process. It's not passive. You're not just throwing it out there and it's good. No, if you want strikes and you want to fool these fish, you need to make it look as natural as possible. And that takes upstream mending, downstream mending, taking away slack, adding slack, rod positioning, being willing to set the moment you see that thing hesitate or dip or bob or dive, dodge or duck, what have you. And also, that's on that setting part. Like, I don't think a lot of new anglers, they can hardly believe that their bobber is going down or that thing ticked a little. And so they're stunned. They're like deer in the headlights. I'm yelling, "Zat, zat, zat, zat." And they're like, "Ugh." And, I want those new anglers to understand in the beginning, especially, and this applies to intermediate expert anglers, you're setting on everything. My saying, and if anyone's had fish with me, they know I always say everything's a fish until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
Whether it's you don't know if it's the bottom, you don't know, if a weird current has caught, your flies. If you think it doesn't even have to move. If you think something may have picked up and mouthed your fly, go ahead and put a set. And then, of course, famous guide speak, hook sets are free.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I from like my personal experience too, when I first started fishing, I think back now, from not knowing much, how many fish I probably missed from not having the right mend, or you're going to, you're setting way too late, or the bobber just drains and you're just staring at it. Especially as a new angler, it's kind of daunting. And then now guiding and watching it just all the time, you're like, oh, that was definitely, it just moved a little bit left or right or this, and that was definitely a fish, and I should be setting on that. So it's a whole learning process. It doesn't come overnight. It takes, time out on the water.
Mm-hmm.
And how long would you say it took to get like comfortable guiding and really get to know the river, be familiar with the different stretches?
So what's it like learning a new river? I was lucky. I kind of shortcutted the process by fishing with Stefan almost exclusively, and having a guide as your fishing buddy on his home water, you will learn things pretty quick. So the hatches, I learned that. Actually, I started fishing with Stefan on my first trip with him. It was during the Squall hatch. So I got to learn the river from the spring on through the fall. So I remember the Squallow season, which I considered a size 12 being a big fly. And that's what we were fishing, size 10s and 12s. So learning the hatches from a guide, what bugs he's reaching for, what he recommended. And I was already a fly tire. So I would go home and crank out some of these flies on my own and bring them with me on our floats. One of the first things he did was teach me how to row. And that way he wouldn't be just rowing my fat ass down the river whenever we jumped on the boat. And so I feel bad for him, because I knew how terrible I was at rowing. Everyone is when they first start.
Oh, yeah.
And he would teach me how to hold a straight line, how to, position the anglers for potentially the best drifts they can achieve. And that was my big takeaway from Stefan. I mean, he was pulling hard on those sticks just to maintain you in a perfect spot, just to be able to get, a few seconds of good drift. And so, I mean, we did that for a couple seasons, and before he even approached me asking if I wanted to become a guide. So it took me a few years to learn the Yakima River. And even when I started guiding, I had a good base knowledge, but it took me my first couple of seasons to actually continue to learn more spots, more how it behaved in different flows, uh, how it fished, through the seasonal changes and the water temperatures. So that was just constant learning. I can't stress that enough. It's just, man, I should have started writing this stuff down years ago.
Yeah. Well, the changes of the season on the Yakima, I mean, even the change from day to day can be, it's mind blowing to me. So you talked about like you're learning to guide. You talked about kind of your experience a little bit, learning a new river. How is it? How is it to operate an outfitter?
Oh, it's, everyone always comments like, oh, you have the dream job, which I honestly can't complain. There's a lot of worse things to be doing out there. Not saying that guiding is bad by all means, but it's not, you're just not fishing as much as you used to probably.
Yeah.
Some days fishing is the last thing farthest from your mind when you get done with a full day rowing that boat. But there's still days that, it's I want to go back through that same stretch and pick up those fish that some people left behind because of missed sets, and because the fishing was just so awesome. But it's most guys will tell you it's a lot of work before, after, even on your days off. You're resetting your gear, washing dishes, washing your boat, keeping your truck serviceable. Yeah, I mean, it beats up your vehicle, so you're doing a lot of stuff that's unseen to our clients, just to be able to be Johnny on the spot the morning of, meeting your guests, ready to go. There's a lot of hectic stuff happening minutes before that trip even goes off. I'm quite sure Kyle can tell you all about that, being in Alaska, where it's even more robust conditions. But and then that's just being a guide, and then transitioning to become manager of other guides, and owning an outfit. You got to tack on emails, phone calls. On top of that, there's a lot of admin stuff, and thankfully I have my wife Sarah, who does and alleviates a lot of that by managing that admin side of the house with the calendars and whatnot. So I'm left with some phone calls, some emails, because she's not on the water every day, and she gets a lot of calls and emails, asking about really specific stuff that only a guide would do. So sometimes I have a list of people to call back at the end of the day when I get off the water. And hopefully people understand that, guides make their living on the water. So, we're not just sitting at home.
Yeah.
And so I'm usually, especially in the summertime, I have to call them back the next day, because I won't be getting back into the front door until like 11 p.m. some days. But my main job is to maintain the guide and the guide staff. So keeping communication on, how's your trip go, having any issues. And I've been so lucky that Mike put together the, Stefan, Keegan, Kyle, when I took over, it was pretty easy for me. I didn't have to build this thing from the ground up, and there was not a lot of managing, quote unquote, to take place. It's just a matter of, hey, you need anything? Or guides would have questions about this or that, and hopefully I can, answer that. I know a lot of times, like, Kyle would get off the water, and and we'd see each other on the river as well, and he'd be like, yeah, how was your this or that? I noticed you were getting him on this or that, or what we're using, we were struggling, and even vice versa, like, what were you using? So always exchanging that information between guides, that helps, because we're not in competition with each other. We're all here to make sure our guests have a good time and enjoy themselves. So sharing of that information is really important. So the communication back and forth between other guides and myself, that's really important. I have not had to manage, we're a small crew, and for the most part we hang out with each other when we have days off. We go hunting together. So we're just I think of it, we're just a group of friends that happen to work together, and that's how I like it. I'm not having to referee anything, or there's no real drama. Other than that, I'd say not a ton outside of that.
Yeah.
but there's enough where it's not just I can just go tie flies and call it a night. There's some extra administrative things to do, to think about. Always thinking, down the road. Hey, we've got this kind of outing together. The spring we have OGR, putting together that kind of stuff. There's definitely some things, but I can't complain about it. It's been pretty easy.
And I just want to give a little shout out to Sarah, because like all the work she does on the front end, it's nice that we just have to show up and take the clients out, writing an email to someone or talking about stuff and getting all this paperwork done. That's a lot to do, and then to go out and guide, and then to send, your thank you letter the next day or the next week. So yeah, that is a lot to do.
Yeah, I will say I am experiencing, because some people decided to move away to Alaska, finding new guides. That's the challenge I'm faced with right now.
Yeah.
I'm always keeping my feelers out for other people that are willing to, put in the work and become a guide. There's a lot of glamour associated with guiding, but ask any guide, it's not that glamorous behind the scenes. It is fun. It is rewarding. You're not gonna be getting rich guiding, but we do it because we're passionate about it. We still get a kick out of seeing the joy and experiencing the joy with a guest that has like never caught a fish on a fly rod. Before meeting you, they had never picked up a fly rod. I mean, if you can't get joy out of that, you're probably in the wrong business. But that is the awesomeness of guiding. That's the perks.
So when you're looking for a new guide for the staff, what are you looking for in a person? Whether that be them themselves or experience. Well, what are you looking for?
We can approach it several different ways. There's people that are great fly anglers that could potentially be terrible guides, because they can't translate the skills necessary to become successful, where they can't quantify or put into words, the techniques that we use to catch fish. Essentially, that's what we're doing. So I'm not always looking for, like the greatest fly angler in the world to become a guide. Someone that has the knowledge base, definitely, but is also teachable and can teach. So it's essentially an attitude thing. I don't mind having somebody that's a little cocky. Most young 20-something-year-olds, they're cocky. But having that humbleness to say, I don't know everything. Teach me, show me. Picking up rowing. Even if they don't know how to row, we can teach you.
Yeah.
It takes some time. It takes experience. I was there years ago, never having rowed a boat before. So that they can come to us lacking in certain departments, and we can mold them and train them. Sometimes having somebody that's very new in most aspects, like never have rowed, never have guided, and that way we can mold them to the guide we want them to be, or that we want to work with, essentially. I've worked with other guides, that have guided for other companies before, and they may be great guides, but they may not be the right guide for our outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm kind of looking for with a new guide. There's no, resume boxes I have to check off for me to be interested in that person. But the main thing is just attitude, willing to learn and teach.
Gotcha. That's well said.
Yeah, and I can speak from experience. Obviously, when I came in, I didn't know how to row. I could row, I couldn't guide and row. I had some knowledge on the Yakima, but I didn't know everything. And like you said earlier, Todd, I felt like it took a couple years of guiding to really feel comfortable, like being clients, being on the Yakima, being confident throughout the seasons, and learning everything, and just having a good group of guys around me, having you and Stefan and Keegan, and then just you guys answering questions, and then just being there on our days off. We would go fishing. You'd show me things, teach me things. And I think it's, in a way, it's good to come in without a lot of experience. And I've noticed that with other outfitters I've worked with on how, depending on who you start working with and the guys you have around you, that's going to be what sets the tone for the rest of your guiding career. I've seen places where the outfit might not be the best group of dudes. They don't mesh really well. Some things are kind of happening behind the scenes that aren't going well. And that's going to, if you bring somebody on into that guide staff that is new, hasn't had any previous experience, that could set a bad tone for that person down the road. And so I've always looked back working at Ellensburg Angler, feeling like I had some of the best dudes that I could possibly have worked with, that really set my tone for my guiding career in the future. So I definitely think that if you come in not knowing anything about guiding and willing to learn, I think that's super, super important if you've got the right mindset and a great group of dudes around you.
Yep, I agree.
For sure.
And what's your experience been like for that first season for you, Keaton, guiding with us?
Yeah, I think it was something that I had to get into a level of comfort, and I wasn't used to it. But like Kyle said, having you guys around me and just getting behind the oars and being willing to take some trips and just kind of to figure it out. I had a lot of friends. I had you guys come out with me like long before I started guiding. I mean, I was probably fishing like a month or two before, as like every weekend that I could make it over. But just like trying to be a sponge to the people that have done it for so long, I think that made me a better guide and more, like you said, being teachable and being able to like almost mirror that to be able to teach a client. I really enjoyed it, and I think just like the points you touched on, there's just nothing like being able to teach someone how to do something that they've never done before and be successful at it. So I really love doing it, and like you said, you got to have a grinding passion for it, to be willing to get up and get out there and understand that maybe the first half's not the best day, or maybe the second half, or maybe not this, but or the whole day, but you're still willing to get out there and talk to people and talk to clients and try to make it the best experience you can. So
Yep.
Yeah. And it's not always about the fishing.
Mhm.
That's one of the biggest things I learned this year, is like I've had some great days, but if you're not chatting and you're not having good conversation, there's a lot more than just getting people on fish. So
yeah, I'd say a guide wears many hats throughout the day. We're like a chef, we're the cruise director, we're the motor of the boat. You're the teacher, instructor, psychiatrist, or therapist. Some days, some people just want to talk. And for me, a lot of people say don't bring up these topics in the boat. And if that's the direction the conversation goes, hey, why not? We shouldn't be afraid to talk about certain things in the boat. The boat, it's the tree of trust in the little nest. Anything goes. What happens in the boat stays in the boat.
Exactly. I have that little sticker on the side of my truck. What happens in the boat stays in the boat.
Yeah.
I would like to say one of my favorite things is showing the bighorn sheep in the canyon, or like after the big burn that they had in the canyon, how cool it was to see all those deer like right on the water's edge.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it like to be Orvis endorsed? Like what comes with that endorsement? And yeah, tell us about that.
The Orvis endorsement, that's kind of like a industry stamp of approval from the Orvis family. Let's see. When we get a lot of anglers that travel to the Seattle area, and they're not from the Northwest, and they're like, hey, I want to go fishing. What's the first thing they do? They go on the Orvis website and see who's Orvis endorsed. That is saying, they can expect a level of professionalism, a certain standard that they're familiar with if they've gone out with any other Orvis endorsed outfitter across the country or the world. And so we maintain that standard, whether it's be their ability to instruct, our knowledge of the local area, our customer service, that kind of thing. So they're not hesitant. They're fairly comfortable saying, oh, I've gone out with this Orvis guide on the East Coast, it'll be fine going out with. And that's kind of like what it's saying. It's kind of like a review or a rating to maintain that. Once in a while, we've got the manager of the Western Orvis endorsed outfitters. He'll come out and jump on a boat with us, kind of pretend that he's like a newbie client or not familiar with the area and say, hey, show me how to fish this river. What's this area? And usually it's going to be one of our newer guides looking at you, Keaton. And just to see, are we maintaining that standard? Yeah. And that's the word I keep coming back to, is a standard. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
And
yeah, sure.
Just to ask, is it easy to get this endorsement?
I don't think it is. There's some requirements in our contract with Orvis that we have to maintain. And originally, Mike Kennedy, our previous owner, he was approached by the Orvis folks to become endorsed, and so he actually met with them. And it's not like they just like, hey, boom, stamp, you're good. They actually kind of met with him a couple times, see how he ran his business. Will it be a good fit, essentially? And so that was pretty easy. As a transition, my big question was, well, were we going to be able to maintain that Orvis endorsement as we transitioned to owners? And thankfully we were. And my job is to maintain that standard through my guides and the services that we provide. And hopefully, we love the relationship. We work with the Orvis Seattle shop. We used to do it with the Orvis Bellevue shop. And so they recommend us all the time, and we're very grateful. And in turn, we help them out with putting on seminars, classes. If they need anything, we can, we're like the local subject matter experts, and we can come out, barring, the COVID precautions. We've kind of put that on hold for a couple of years, but hopefully this new season we'll be going back over there and putting on some, whether it be tying demonstrations or talking about the fishing opportunities here in Central Washington.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So you mentioned that a couple other times, and the COVID restrictions, and that's kind of hit us as soon as you took over Ellensburg Angler. How have you guys responded to that, and how have you seen how that's kind of changed the landscape of how you guide?
We just followed the state mandates. Whether there's masking, we have cleaning supplies in the shop, and cleaning everything a little more often, masking up in the vehicles when we can't physically distance ourselves from each other. And on the boat, I like to say masks are optional because we're outside and whatnot. But typically I'm always wearing my buff anyways for sun protection. So I do have some sort of facial covering happening. Yeah. The scary part was when it first hit and everything was shut down. We had a little bit of guiding happening in the March timeframe, and then boom, we were shut down, and that kind of scared us. Like, thankfully, we didn't have debt and overhead that we kept having to maintain, inventory on the shelves, nothing like that. So we just had to ride that out. And then once they opened things back up, we were full steam ahead, and we had a lot of catching up to do for that missed opportunities from that shutdown. So I'd say moving forward, we're probably one big thing we stopped doing was doing the hot meals on the side of the river, busting out that barbecue and chairs and grilling, and we just switched to serving deli sandwiches on in the boat, and that's actually, I don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
Just it does cut back on the amount of time that you're not rowing. For example, it's like the lunch break is a guide's break as well. They're not rowing and retying. It gives them a little breather as well. But that's been severely shortened with just the sandwiches, and that's okay. There's less dishes to clean at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off, and most anglers have responded really positively. They're like, I don't come for the food, I come for the fishing. So let's fish, and hey, let's do it. That's been fine for us.
For sure. So we've talked a little bit about like our guiding on the Yakima. What other places does Ellensburg Angler offer guide trips?
So we do offer the Natchez trips in the summertime. once it opens and if it's not on fire.
Yeah.
And then we also offer Rocky Ford Spring Creek trips, walk and wade through the, from November all the way through the early summer.
Nice. And
we use it kind of as an plan B a lot of times when the yak starts to blow out in the spring. Yeah. Not everyone goes for it, and we don't mind. It's something, if you've never fished it, go ahead and try and experience it. But there's fish in it. They're catchable. It's doable.
So if somebody wanted to book a trip, what's the best way to reach out to you and either talk about what fits best for them or just to book outright?
Two ways. You can give our shop a call. A lot of the information can be found on our website, through the Ellensburg Angler website. You can give us a call or email us. There's that option. You can email us. And a lot of people ask, the questions that are easily found on the website. Like most places, people don't want to read; they just want to hear it. But I'd say, be honest and upfront with your expectations of your guide service. Like, hey, I want to catch big fish. I want to catch lots of big fish. I want to, I've never held a fly rod. A lot of people have a kind of fantasy of what's going to happen on the river, and we're, our job as a guide is to make that as much as, make it happen as much as we can, but also bring their expectations down to reality. Yeah. If you can't get a drift, to save your life, then you might not be expecting, just fish after fish after fish. There's some days where that actually happens, I will say, but that's rare. But being honest with your expectations of your ability and what you want out of the trip, that would be it.
Gotcha. I think some people also forget is that you're making money on Mother Nature, right? So some days she'll change on you, and it's never going to be the same. So.
Yeah, sometimes like what we were talking about before we started recording, like the river will go from 1,300 CFS to 2,600 CFS in just a few hours, and that can throw a lot of things off. And you might have something planned, but like Keith said, Mother Nature is a lot of times in charge, and you just can't. You got to roll with it.
Yep,
being adaptable. So we've talked about your background, how you got into guiding. Managing an outfitter. Is there anything else that we haven't asked you that you think people should know, whether that be about you or your guiding or Ellensburg Angler?
Not that we haven't covered, really.
Gotcha. Well, let's finish this portion off then by kind of rolling into the seasons of the yak. Just a brief overview, and especially coming up into our spring season with squallas and March browns, kind of those first big bugs of the year.
Yeah, we are excited. It might happen a little sooner. As soon as the river calms down. The weather has been unusually warm. That leads us to believe that the squallas might be even happening in late February. And for those of you that don't know, the squall is the first major hatch of the new guiding season. And it usually happens in March. Some years it starts in February. From a long, dark winter of staring at a bobber or swinging streamers, first good opportunities for consistent dry fly action. And I feel like the squalls are moving already. I took a water temperature the other day and it was like 40. So we're getting close to some squall action. And as we move through the spring, the March browns, blue wings, the good thing is it's pre-spawn, pre-runoff. The fish are hungry. They've got the spawn coming up. They need to pack on these calories. The water's warming. They're getting more active. So it makes for a good recipe for great fishing. But on the flip side, as it warms, things are melting. We might get some rainstorms. So the water flow is just a roller coaster. If you look at the graphs, it's going to go up, down, fish, and then it gets blown out. So just being flexible. I'd say 10, 15, 20% of our trips are going to get rescheduled from the spring just because the conditions are not there. And of course, majority of people understand that the conditions are not under our control. We're guides, we're not gods. So that's the thing. It's it can be good fishing and it can be pretty crappy conditions. So we're good on about not taking our guests out in iffy conditions, unless it's the only day they have. They came to town. They're going to be leaving town shortly. I'd say, hey, we can either go for it and give it a try, and it might work out or it might not. So, we'd like to be flexible in the spring, and then we'll have the runoff. Runoff is not guaranteed. It doesn't happen every year where all the melt comes down at once. And typically, when I first started guiding, you could almost depend on a couple of weeks of mud season where the river was just stayed blown out, muddy, logs rolling down. But that hasn't been the case in the last few seasons, where we'll fish right through the month of May, right into June. And, you'll have a blowout 48 hours, 72 hours here and there, but nothing sustained long periods of time, which it does two things. The fishing is awesome usually during that time, but that means come summertime, the fish are a lot smarter. They haven't had that break from seeing our flies and our crappy drifts coming over them. So they're a little more educated coming, moving into that summer season, which is fine. I'm up for the challenge. And then the summertime, we start to get busy, school's out, people are ready, they're on vacation. We've got great dry fly with the caddis continuing. That kind of started in the spring, late spring. But then we have some competition on the river with the tubing crowd. So that can be a pain in the butt. A lot of people just recreating, kayakers, rafters, tubers, drunken idiots. In the beginning of the season, they're just a mild annoyance. By the end of the summer, man, I just want to drown every single one of them. just because every single one that's going to pass you, like, how's the fishing? Getting any luck? All this cliche. Every one that passes you is going to say something like that too. And of course, they don't have control of where they're drifting. They don't have oars most of the time, and so they're just going to go where the Mother Nature takes them, where the river takes them, and that's usually going to be in the water you're trying to fish, or when you're anchored up into the back of your boat. So that's why I get a little. I have to keep reminding myself they're just trying to enjoy Mother Nature just like we are, just in a different way. But that's the summertime. We do get that big temperature swing where we're going to get triple digits. We expect to see that in the late July, August, unless it was last year when we got those two huge heat waves that hit us in June and July, and it was just too hot. And of course, we have to start thinking about water temperatures. Keep monitoring. We don't want to fish with that when that water temp starts to climb into that danger area.
Yeah.
So we either fish super early or go upriver where it's just a few degrees cooler, or we just reschedule our trips. And that's the summertime. The good thing about summertime, you don't have to wear waders. You just wear flip flops and quick drying pants and call it good. And then moving from the summer, throughout the summer, you'll have several different hatches with the PMDs, the golden stones, continuing with the caddis. Late summer, more the terrestrials, summer stoneflies. So there's some good opportunity for big dry fly fishing, which is pretty exciting type of fishing. Real vicious takes, and the water is ripping along the banks. So it's a little more hectic type of fishing because you get one shot in a lot of these little pockets and runs along the bank, and you're ripping on those oars trying to hit the brakes to give that angler just like a half second longer drift. You're rowing pretty hard in the summertime. Actually, all seasons you're rowing pretty hard usually, because when the water's low in the spring and fall, you're rowing laps, so it kind of balances out. The distances that we're traveling in the summertime are probably double, or even more than double the distances we're floating physical river miles that we're fishing in the spring and fall. Just because there's no back rowing happening. You're not going to have that second chance to go back up and hit another spot again. It's just one shot and on to the next run, on to the next spot. So it's different feel to the type of fishing. It's just like, okay, we got the spot 5 yards away. It's coming up. It's going to be 11 o'clock, blah, 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 hit it. And hopefully they can put that fly where it needs to go. And then towards the end of end of summer, things are going to cool down. Thankfully, we'll still have the terrestrials around. Some of their best terrestrial fishing can take place in the late summer, early fall, September, when that water starts to drop right after Labor Day. It's starting to cool down, but you can still get pretty warm days in early September. And the good thing is, the flip flop has started where the water's dropping, and the fish are going to start bunching up, which is good. You got half the water you had in the summertime when it first starts dropping, and it's not as hard to figure out where they're going to be, and they're still, eating like normal, nothing crazy. The water hasn't really cooled off yet, and so they're just fine. And then we move into the fall, which is what most anglers would consider their favorite season on the Yakima, where the water flows are sometimes their lowest, and the water's cooler. The fish seem to know that winter's right around the corner. It's time to pack on those calories, and you can get those 40 to 60 fish days on the Yakima in a full day. They're not always going to be huge fish, but you're going to definitely have action, consistent action, which is a good thing. And the hatches will continue through the fall. So you've got the blue wings again, mahoganies, cranes, October caddis. So it's constantly adapting to the different conditions. It's definitely almost time to put on waders. Probably sometime in that fall period, we'll transition and throw some waders back on. And all through probably early to mid-November, depending on how quickly the cold snaps us. And then we'll run just a handful of trips probably in December into the winter. And then the winter, it's okay. You could have good days, but you got to be prepared for the cold, because it gets, just like it gets hot in the summer, it gets freaking cold in the wintertime.
That was really good. Well covered.
That's you make me miss some things like bugs. Like up here, we throw bugs for like a week maybe, and it's like your generic prince nymph or like a pheasant tail, and that's it, because they don't eat bugs. And in the summertime, instead of rowing at 3,500 to 4,000 CFS, the river the creek that I'm on is 250 CFS. So it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. For new people that are just getting into like rowing or floating the Yakima. I know I got a lot of friends that do it in pontoons. What's kind of your like limit on CFS that you're like, I'm not going to float this? Or even for like the pontoon people, like what should be their limit?
That's going to change depending on the section, the time of the year, and their experience level, I'd say. But for me, the river can run at 5,000 CFS and still be fishable. We're talking about the canyon gauge. It's just a matter of what's the clarity like. For this past summer, we were running consistently right around 4,500 CFS, and it was still fine. Yeah. As long as it's sustained and, they're not up and down. If it's consistent, the fish, they'll settle into their feeding lanes where they find them, and they'll be there. For the pontoon guys, usually just because they don't have the ability to anchor, or I should say anchor safely, I'd say fall, early spring, that's the time for them to be out there, because usually they should not be fishing and moving at the same time, just kind of treating it like a transportation device. I do see people like fishing and on a pontoon or a watermaster. It's doable, but I will say, you can do that for so long, but you're going to run yourself into trouble, because you're not paying attention to one or the other. Your fishing may not be that great because you're spending more time trying to control and fish at the same time. So I usually don't recommend that to anglers. Just pull over, anchor up in the soft water, tie your boat off to a tree on the bank, and then just wade fish that specific run. Just kind of a transportation device.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then how about for the wading? What's the cutoff for that, for when it's not safe to wade on the Yak?
For the canyon stretch, I'd say anything in the teens, 1,900 and below, you should have fairly safe wading. 1,500 below, it's very safe. In most places, you can access anything around 1,000, like what we see in the wintertime. It's pretty darn accessible. And, once again, some places you don't even have to get in the water to technically wade fish it. You can just be standing on dry ground, just because if you're fishing it in high water, there's no reason to cast way off the bank. You could just high stick along the bank and find fish.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, we went over some really good points here, and I don't think there's much more to add, so we're going to roll into our favorite time of the podcast, which is our rapid fire round. We got a good selection of questions for you here, Todd. So, Kyle, if you want to get this kicked off, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. All right, Todd. So we ask everybody at the end of the podcast, kind of just a mix of questions, and we'll start off with, what is your favorite fish to catch on the fly rod?
I'd say still just a trout, plain and simple. Because no two fish are the same. I'm not picky. If it's willing to get a bite of fly, I'm down for it. No two fish are the same. Something's gonna be different about every fish that you catch, and so I like that puzzle.
Gotcha.
If you have, what's your dream destination for fly fishing?
Oh, that changes from time to time, but I'd like to say right now, currently, probably the Seychelles.
Yeah.
Go chase after some GTs.
Heck yeah.
It'd be super cool to see a GT crush a fly.
All right. What is your favorite either meal or snack and your favorite drink for a day on the water, you're guiding or you're fun fishing?
I don't really eat during my guide trips. I'll snack on just like a granola bar or something, but you'll always find me with Red Bull or some kind of. I've just recently transitioned to these flavored Monster drinks. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but they're tasty.
Not
it's like
yet.
drinking juice. But if you've been on my boats, I always have Red Bull in my cooler, or I'm drinking one currently.
So if Red Bull's listening, Todd's your guy. You got a sponsor.
Yeah, I'll throw some stickers up on my boat.
All right, you're headed to the river. You hop in your truck. What is your tunes that you're throwing on to when you're going fishing?
It's not usually tunes.
Yeah,
it's usually a podcast or an audiobook.
Okay.
That just gets me in the right headspace.
Gotcha. So you're headed out the door. You got a trip that morning. What's the first thing you're going to grab that you can't leave the house without? It can't be on your person or in your boat.
First thing, my gun.
Important, very important, especially if you're anywhere around Yakima.
Oh yeah.
That's a good one. What's something you wish you knew when you first started fly fishing?
Just fly fishing in general? The price of the rod doesn't necessarily translate to the quality of the rod or the fishability of the rod, or just the brand name, I should say.
Absolutely.
There's some companies that made some clubs that just do. And then there's some, what people think are low end or entry level models that fish awesome and are worth the really good bang for the buck kind of rod. So when I first started, I thought, you got to go with these specific companies. If not, you're not going to be able to catch fish, but that's not true. Finding the right rod for your casting style is more important.
For sure. I agree. And you can't, if you don't have a rod, because you want to get a specific brand. If you don't have a rod, you can't fish at all. So
yeah,
as long as you got something. What is something that you wish you knew when you start guiding?
There's three things. I didn't learn this till a couple years into it, but there's three things for a good guide trip: good food, good fishing, good weather. You can only control one of those. So not taking it personally when the fishing isn't so awesome or the conditions aren't so awesome. Most guys, all guys want you to be successful or their guests to be successful and have fun and whatnot. There's only so much to a point we can do. But I would take it personally when the fishing was slow. Whether we tried everything. You work with what you got, conditions and angler skill wise included.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember personally that I would have days where I felt like shit at the end of the day because we didn't catch fish. And then yeah, like you said, it's something you learn over time that you can't control everything, and you gotta be able to understand that as long as you're providing your clients the best day possible for them, as long as if they're learning something, if they're enjoying their time, that's what's most important. You don't always have to put a bunch of fish in the net.
I think it was the toughest thing for me to realize is like, I always like if you have a really great day the day before and then the next day you go out and it's just complete shit. I was like, oh, what am I doing wrong? But like you guys are saying, it's like some days, maybe the hatches are changing up a little bit or something's changed and I just haven't got the memo or the fishing's just bad in general. So.
Yep.
All right, Keaton, you got this last one.
Yeah, let's end the podcast with your favorite outdoor moment or guide story.
Outdoor moment, guide story. There's so many to think of, or they just all blend together. Outdoor moment.
Sometimes it helps people if you pick your most embarrassing one or the scariest one.
Oh, there's been a couple of times where I had to poop really badly in the boat because if you know me, I love Taco Bell, which I now call future diarrhea. But just coming up with an excuse, and most guests will understand, like, hey, I got to go. Like we just pull over to the side and I'll run into the bushes, grabbing which I never not have in the boat, is TP and baby wipes. That'll save, just stuff them in your boat. Forget about them. But that happens pretty often for me. I think about how close to my trip am I consuming Taco Bell or any iffy foods before I go on a trip. Because some days the spots where you can actually safely get to the side in the summertime are few and far between. Yeah.
Oh man, that is rough.
I think that's the best one we've got yet, Keaton.
That is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, right. You don't need to come up with excuses like, hey, I need to go, just say, guys, I'm having some gastrointestinal distress. I need to get to the side of the river and evacuate my bowels before I deposit into my waders and such. I've yet to actually poop my waders. I've come close. But
they got to realize too, it's going to be a bad day for them too if you shit yourself in your wader. Mm-hmm. Oh man. Well, awesome.
Well, Keaton, you want to roll us out here?
Yeah, here we go. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the Young Guides podcast. We want to just thank Todd for coming on and talking a little bit about his experience, how he got to where he is, and fishing the Yakima. We look forward and we hope that we see some of you out on the Yakima. Make sure to give Todd a call. And Todd, how could they reach you one more time? Give us that.
You can find our website, ellensburgangler.com. Just Google search us or just type that in. You can reach me at Todd at ellensburgangler.com, or you can give us a call. Our number's on the website. And yeah, we'll try to get back to you and get you out on the water.
Awesome. So make sure if you're in the area and you want to get out and fish the Yakima, give Ellensburg Angler a call. Kyle, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, I don't think so. Just thank you for coming on, Todd. It's been good talking with you, and it makes talking with you makes me miss being with that crew and being on the Yakima and miss being home. It's been good to catch up, and appreciate you hopping on. And
yeah, we're counting the days till you come back, Kyle.
As am I.
Well, we want to just thank you and it's been a great time, and thank you if you serve our country. Thank you for taking that sacrifice, serving our country, and looking forward to seeing you on the water. So this is another episode of the Young Guides podcast. Once again, I'm Keaton.
And I'm Kyle.
We'll catch you on the next one.